All right, so this video is on the light and the dark reaction of photosynthesis happening in the chloroplast of a plant cell. And I think sometimes when we see this diagram, we get super overwhelmed and we don't know where to start. But you guys have been learning about this since 4th grade, and you know more about photosynthesis than you think. So let's start from what we know before we get into all the other seemingly complex stuff. So if I gave you a seed, what would you need to keep it alive, or to actually get it to grow? Well, you'd need to give it water. Plants need water. What else do plants need? They need sunlight. And what is the very last thing that some of you guys call air, which I don't like, that plants need? Carbon dioxide, okay? And this is one of the many reasons why plants are so important to us, because they take in the carbon dioxide that we exhale and make oxygen for us to breathe. Because if it was all carbon dioxide in our air, we would die. So there you go. Those are called the reactants. So the reactants are what goes into a chemical equation or a process, okay? When you go to a store, you buy products. Products are what is produced from a factory, so what comes out of a factory. So reactants are what goes into the factory. Products are what comes out of the factory. So what is produced from photosynthesis? We don't produce carbon dioxide. What do we produce for animals to breathe in? Oxygen. So we produce oxygen. And then also, we can't take sun's energy and feed ourselves. Or if every time we laid out by the pool, we would get super fat. So how do we get energy from plants? We either eat them or we eat animals that eat them in the form of a sugar, which is called glucose. And remember, we know that glucose is a sugar because it has ose at the end. Anytime a word has ose or saccharide at the end, it indicates that it is a sugar. And I want you to remember what macromolecule breaks down into sugar. Is it a carbohydrate, a lipid, a nucleic acid, or a protein? Carbohydrate. So if we are talking about carbohydrates, remember carbohydrate. The word carbo means carbon. The word hydrate means water, and water is made of hydrogen and oxygen. That's why glucose is CHO. So, believe it or not, you are almost halfway done with this entire process because you indicated what the reactants were and what the products were, and that is something you have learned in 4th grade. So, before we actually start laying things out, the next thing I want to talk about is the light and the dark reaction. The light reaction happens in the light, and the dark reaction happens in the dark. So, let's go ahead and label those. The light reaction is going to happen right here in those pancake-looking things. And the dark reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle, is going to happen right here. Remember, all of this is happening in the chloroplast. But there are some ways to remember where specifically in the chloroplast each of these are happening. So you already told me the reactants. You already told me the products. You already told me the light and the dark reaction. But where does the light reaction actually take place? What do these lumpy things look like? Kind of look like pancakes, right? Well, pancakes give me thick thighs. So the way we remember where the light reaction happens is in the thylakoid, because pancakes give me thick thighs, okay? There's no fun way to remember the dark reaction, but the dark reaction happens in the empty space around the chloroplast called the stroma, okay? Pancakes also make you happy where there's sunlight. So thylakoid, light reaction, dark reaction, stroma. We are officially more than halfway done. You've told me the reactants, you've told me the products, you've told me the light reaction where it occurs, and the dark reaction where it occurs. So now let's actually start laying some stuff out, okay? In the light reaction, what do you think is the energy source? Look at these reactants. Which of these three? Sunlight, right. Awesome, okay? Sunlight and water kind of go hand in hand, okay? So what also goes in the light reaction is water, okay? Think about sunlight and water kind of as yin and yang, so they go in together. That leaves carbon dioxide going in. You can see that the arrows going in are going to be the reactants because that's what's actually going into this entire process, okay? Then we have these products, okay? How are we going to figure out which goes where? Well, oxygen goes right here, and I'm going to talk to you how we get that, okay? Sunlight comes in and it breaks down the water using electrons, and it gives us oxygen. Well, that oxygen came from the water, but what's going to happen to that hydrogen? Well, one thing that's weird is we have these electron carriers, because remember, the sunlight breaks the water down into hydrogen, oxygen, and electrons. And we call that electron carrier NADPH, okay, NADPH. And all you need to remember is that this is an electron carrier, but what specifically does it carry from water? Well, let's figure this out. Is there an oxygen here? No, the oxygen was released here. But what in this could have been from water? The hydrogen, okay? So NADPH. Remember that sunlight also gives the plant energy in the form of ATP, but the light reaction doesn't really need it because it has sunlight as its energy source. So what happens is in the light reaction, we take in sunlight, we take in water, and we release oxygen. We also release ATP that we give to the stroma, or the dark reaction, and we release NADPH to give to the dark reaction, okay? The dark reaction is missing light. That's why it's called dark. So what energy source is it going to use to break down this carbon dioxide? Which one of these that's being sent over holds energy? ATP. And when we pop off that third phosphate, we have ADP. So when we use that energy, we have ADP to be passed back to the light reaction. And again, that ADP is going to be recharged and become ATP, okay? That ADP allows the carbon dioxide to break down. So we have carbon and we have oxygen. But remember, our very last product is glucose. So we're talking carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Well, we get the carbon from the carbon dioxide. We get the oxygen from the oxygen and carbon dioxide. But where might we get that hydrogen? What's going in to this reaction that gives us hydrogen? The NADPH. So when that ATP helps us break down carbon dioxide, that gives us the carbon and the oxygen, but that H comes off the NADPH and we are left with NADP. So all that you really need to break this down into, guys, is the reactants, the products, where it happens. And then this cycle is just like that ATP-ADP cycle we've done already, okay? The light reaction has energy from the sun, so it makes ATP, and that water has a leftover hydrogen, so it sends it over in this electron carrier NADPH. The dark reaction doesn't have energy because it doesn't have sunlight. So it has to use that ATP in order to break the CO2 down, just like the sunlight broke the water down. So that ATP is a dead battery and it becomes ADP, where it's recharged again. Carbon dioxide doesn't have a hydrogen, and we have this waste product right here. The hydrogen wasn't used in the light reaction, so it went to the dark reaction and it was released as glucose. And that is why we were left with NADP. If you're still confused, come on in and see me. Thanks, guys.